Come for the bread, stay for the politics. My name's Ben Walsh, and this is Let Them Eat Bread. Today, we have a very special and admittedly very short episode of Let Them Eat Bread, since today we are going to be making the traditional Passover bread of matzah. Matzah is an interesting bread because it's not leavened, and I'll talk more about it, but the first thing we need to do is we need to start our oven. This whole process can't take more than 18 minutes. I'll explain why in a second, but first, let's set our ovens. I'm going to set my oven to about 500 degrees. If your oven keeps a more regular temperature, you might want to keep it around 475. All right, now that your oven is set, the next thing you need to do while it's warming is twofold. One, you need to take a rack and put it in the very top row of your oven if you can. Second, you need to make sure that any tray or trays that you're going to use need to be preheating with the oven. I'm going to be using 2 trays that I've already made up with oil on them. You can see here. I'm going to be putting them in the top of my oven. So, while that's preheating, let's talk a little bit about ingredients. Today, we're only going to need a little bit of flour, a little bit of water. If you want, optionally afterwards, we're going to paint on some olive oil with some garlic and some salt. But no need, you can eat matzah totally plain. Although I wouldn't recommend it, it's not very good. But it is required for Passover, so we are going to make it. So the reason that it has to be done from start to finish in 18 minutes is because apparently those are the rules about making it kosher Passover. So for any Jews who are watching, if you want to make your own kosher Passover matzah, you need to make sure that start to finish, as in from the second the water hits the flour to the second it comes out of the oven, it is going to take it's got to take 18 minutes or less. That's one of the reasons that we're setting our ovens so high, so it'll cook quickly. It is going to cook in about 4 minutes. You might need a little bit more time, but just remember that 18-minute time point. One additional thing, if you want to be extra careful, the flour you buy should be a special Passover flour, what makes it special for Passover is that it's been kept away from all liquids. I'm using regular grocery store flour. I'm not going to be using kind of a special Passover flour. So we're going to stick to the 18-minute rule to try and make it as kosher as possible. It will effectively be kosher Passover matzah. But let's start assembling some things. And then I have a timer so we can do this together. I'm a little bit panicky. I tried this last night. It came out okay. So hopefully it comes out well today when we do it together. All right. So we're going to start with 1 cup of all-purpose flour. Level that off as much as possible. We're going to put this in our bowl. And then we're going to take about a tablespoon of flour, or a little less, and just lightly, very, very lightly dust our work surface. I put too much flour on when I was making it last night as a test before doing it live with you guys. And the matzah was really floury and powdery on the bottom of it, and it wasn't particularly nice. The olive oil painting helps with that, but it's just going to be nicer without it. So we're going to be a little more careful today about how much flour we have down. I am going to keep some extra flour on the board, though, because as we roll it out, or as you press it out with your hands, if you don't have a rolling pin, you see I have my rolling pin here. We're going to need that in a second. But if you don't have one, feel free to use your hands, your knuckles, just to kind of push it out and spread it out. Okay. So hopefully the little amount of flour we put on here will keep it will keep it from sticking to both the rolling pin and the board, but also not too much flour that we kind of have this weird floury texture underneath, which isn't particularly nice. So, all right, our oven is still not preheated. I have a particularly slow oven, so I am just going to mention one more little thing about today's episode. It's going to be a little different. The episode is not just going to be 18 minutes. Obviously, we're waiting for our ovens to preheat. and you want to take out all of your ingredients in advance. Anything you're going to use, you want to take out now, because once the clock starts ticking, 18 minutes is a surprisingly short amount of time. It's definitely going to be difficult to keep up if you are not, if you don't have everything in front of you, if you're getting stuff out. The other thing is, we're going to knead this. We're going to knead for a very short amount of time. You should try not to knead this for more than a minute. Yesterday, I kneaded it for about 5 minutes, and it made the texture of the matzah a little chewier, even though it was really flat. So we're going to try not knead as much today. Also, have some extra water around. I have about 1/3 of a cup to 1/2 a cup water in here now. If you want to put a little bit more water in, you're just going to have to test it. When we're mixing it, we're going to use a fork to mix it, so make sure you get one of those out. You're just going to keep mixing it in the bowl until it forms this kind of rough, shaggy ball of dough that you'll pour out onto your board and mix together. Again, this is just to make sure that you have the right ratios. And if it's a little moist, that's okay. Just add a little bit more flour. Just remember, we're working quickly. So everything we do is going to be purposeful. Everything we do is as much as we can be, is going to be quick and precise. And then after we make our matzah and we're letting it cool a little bit, speaking of cooling, I have 2 oven cooling racks out. Get your racks out now. It's very difficult to get them out while you're trying to yank a tray out of the oven. Oh, one more thing on that. You will need to flip these about halfway through the cooking process. So make sure that you have a tongs of some kind, because you're not going to want to touch these. You're going to be really, really hot when you go to touch them. So after we bake everything, and these are cooling, and I'm putting a little bit of olive oil on, we'll talk a little bit of politics today, but this is going to be a short episode. We have a monster episode coming up next week. We're going to be making brioche, which is going to require 2 parts of the episode. We're going to have a Friday episode and a Saturday episode. The Friday episode is going to be around 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The Saturday episode is, as usual, going to be at noon Eastern Time. Oh, one last thing. Our ovens are going to get really hot today. If you have a finicky fire alarm, find a way to move any potential smoke away from it. Obviously, you don't want your fire alarm going off. And if I have to run off camera for some reason, it's because my fire alarm's going off. And I'm just going to have to reset it for you guys. So be patient with me and be patient with yourselves. But remember, we will be on a time crunch. So with that said, let's crack open the timer. All right, 18 minutes are on the clock. This is still not going yet, but it definitely will be by the time we get going. All right, no pressure or anything. Let's do this. So we have our flour, we have our fork, we have our water. I'm just going to put this on here and keep my fork in my left hand, my fork in my right hand, so I can keep mixing as I pour in some water. You want to pour in your water about a tablespoon at a time. All right, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. All right, so we're pouring in a little bit of water at a time. Keep going. Oh, if you spill some flour, it's okay. If it gets stuck to your fork, just use your fingers real quick to get it off. It's not going to be the end of the world. Just keep stirring, try and get this all mixed together. All right, a little bit more water. Again, you want to keep doing this so you have a nice shaggy dough. It should come together into a very, very rough dough ball. If you need to use the fork to kind of move it around to get the flour to stick, that's fine too. We still have a little bit more water left, so let's keep pouring that in little by little. And try to make sure that when you're doing this, you're getting the water to get in contact with the dried flour as opposed to the dough that you already have. All right, 17 minutes left. And we're getting close. You can see here that my flour is starting to come together a little bit. All right, more water. All right, come on, flour mixture. All right, you will have some flour left over, right? Because when you knead, you're gonna use the kneading process to bring that all together. But as much as possible, try not to have that much flour in there. It will make the whole process easier. All right, 16.5 minutes. Put a little bit more water in here. If you already have a dough that has pretty much come together into one solid shaggy mass, and you are not having trouble with excess flour in your bowl, transfer it out immediately. Get to kneading, right? If you can do this faster than me, you absolutely should. So, by the way, if you are ahead of me, once you get your kneading done, the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take your rolling pin or your fingers, you're going to roll this out pretty evenly into a giant rectangle, about 1/4 of an inch thick, very thin, or even thinner than that if you want to. It's a matter of preference. It will cook faster the thinner it is. All right, so I have a shaggy dough. I've been kind of kneading it in the bowl a little bit, so let's pull this out just a little bit. And there'll be some dough that sticks to your bowl. That's okay. All right. Oh, my hands are shaking. All right, we're in kneading town. We are kneading a little bit here, nice and quick. All right, this is still a little wet, so I'm gonna take advantage of the fact that I have some flour on my board here. And you're just kneading it till it's smooth. Just so it's one smooth ball, it's no longer shaggy, because that's how much flour you're gonna need. Sorry, that is the consistency you're gonna need to roll it out the way that we're gonna want to. Okay. All right, and we're going, and we're going. I am trying to leave about 6 minutes on my timer for cooking, so that I have a second just in case it doesn't cook as fast as I think it will. And our oven is still preheating. Come on, oven, I need you to be there for us when we do this. Okay. All right, I think we're there. We're close. We're pretty close. All right, let's just get a couple more kneads in. And again, I'm just pushing my palm down and folding over the top, holding the rest of the dough in place and rotating 90 degrees each time. You can see I'm gathering a little bit of the flour from the rest of my board here. Try and smooth this out without making it too powdery. Okay. All right, this is pretty smooth. All right, so form this into kind of a ball or a pancake. What you're going to do is you're going to use your rolling pin to do an upwards and a sideways, and you're going to roll out in all directions. And then you're going to keep doing that. Take some flour, sprinkle it on top. If you can, just kind of roll it in the flour real quick. We cannot have this sticking to our rolling pin. So over here. All right, how are we doing on time? 13 minutes. Don't be afraid to be aggressive with this. We want a nice big rectangle. Throw some more flour on it if you need. That's why we have our flour next to us. I'm gonna need some more flour as well. Oop. Yeah, don't go back and forth. I find back and forth is hard. Just do an up and a down, or a different direction, if that's what works for you. All right, 12 minutes. We still got time. We're doing all right. I'll put this over here, make my life a little easier. Try and stick to that rectangle shape if you can. It will make some of this a lot easier. If not, that's okay. I'll take a little bit more flour, put it on here, put some more on our board, flip this over. Clearly it needs some more floury love here. All right, keep going. Make it as big of a matzah as you possibly can. Flip frequently. Make sure it's not sticking. Literally the last thing we need is for this to stick. We'll make it very difficult for everything we're trying to do with it. And again, nice big rectangle. Use 2 hands on your rolling pin like I'm doing if it's giving you some trouble, some grief. Again, we want it about 1/4 of an inch. I'm almost there. Our oven is not almost there, though. Oh, Nelly. Keep going, keep rolling, guys. We are close to the finish line, or as Moses would say, the promised land. The promised land of matzah. All right, mine has obviously become not the right shape, but that's okay, because we're going to cut it up. All right. So it's about the shape I want it. It's about the size I want it. Let's just make sure that it's not going to stick. Throw some more flour on there. 10 minutes, guys. We are almost ahead of schedule, dare I say. All right. All right, so we have our matzah in more or less a rectangular shape. Not really. That's all right. Kind of an oval. It's all right. It's all good. Matzah's not perfect. You know what? Neither of any of us, right? Moses wasn't perfect. It's all good. All right, so now that we have our matzah in the right shape, we're going to take our bench scraper or a knife, and we're going to cut it into squares. I'm going to cut mine into 6 squares. This technically allows you to cut it into 8 squares, but I think 6 squares is going to be nicer. So 6 rectangles. If it's really nice and big, you can cut it into like 9. All right. It's a little hard to see what I'm doing. Essentially, I'm just taking this and creating them into these little squares. All right. So now, ooh, it's getting a little hot in here. All right, so now what we have to do before we put these in our oven, we need to take our fork and we need to pierce through each one at least 25 times. This prevents rising and also gives matzah that nice hold pattern. So just keep stabbing through. Your fork has to go all the way through. So we're going to flip over as soon as we finish one side. We're going to do the second side again. All right. Hold your matzah down so it doesn't go anywhere. Pardon the loud noises. All right, flip it over one more time. Well, a bunch more times, but keep going. Don't stop, we're on a timer. All right, 8 minutes, we can do this. I want it in the oven, 5 or 6 minutes left. All right, flip it over. All right, 3 more, guys. Keep going. This is the most stressful episode of Let Them Eat Bread ever, by the way, just in case anyone was wondering or keeping track. Probably will also be the most ever one ever until next year when I make matzah again. Or maybe I'll never make it again. Who knows? We'll see. Oh, the oven is ready for us. All right. That's good. I was getting a little nervous. Maybe you guys are smarter than me, and you guys actually waited for your oven to be ready to start doing this whole process. If you were, kudos to you. All right, one last side. Okay, our matzah should be full of holes. You can see it here, right? The matzah is full of holes. All right, so now we have 6 minutes left. We're going to take our hot hands here. We're going to take our trays out and put these on. All right, let's go. Pardon the loud noises. We're working fast here. Not being quiet or courteous or anything. I'm going to do 3 on a tray. And as I said, that might happen. That's all right. We baked in time for that. No puns intended. Was a good pun, though. All right, these need to go in our oven. Set a timer for 2 minutes, and then we're going to pull them out and flip them over. All right, a little bit of a break. How are we doing on time? 5 minutes, 48 seconds. All right, we're doing okay. We're doing okay. Deep breaths, guys. We got it in the oven with enough time to cook it. We might have even gotten it in the oven with enough time to let it brown a little bit. That would be really nice. So that would be great if we can do, if we managed that. So now we wait, just let it cook. I'm gonna get a drink of water. It's stressful. You guys should get a drink of something. I'm having water on the counter, but you can have whatever you want. Saturday morning, mimosas are a thing, right? Not Sunday mornings. Sunday mornings. I forget I said anything. All right, let's put some things away. Calm down a little bit. Oh, we only got a minute left. Okay, maybe not. So when you're looking to see if these are done, you want to make sure there's a little bit of browning on each side. That's why they're cooking so fast and at such a high temperature. So you don't want them to bubble up and become like pita. That's why I poked the holes in them so they didn't expand. We're just going to make sure when we flip them over that they're not like that. If they are like that for whatever reason, just use your tongs and press down those bubbles a little bit. We really don't want those bubbles to form if we can avoid it. All right, 20 seconds now. We're going to take them out and flip them over. Hopefully they're floured enough that they won't stick. If they stick, we're going to be in a world of trouble, but I'm hoping they don't. So, and we used a lot of flour in this recipe, so I think they won't stick. All right, let's flip them. Let's go. All right, another 2-minute timer. So mine are actually looking a little raw, so they actually might need a little bit more time. I might let the clock run out on them a little bit. We'll have to see how they're doing after about 2 minutes. If yours are nice and white and have little bits of brown on them, take them out, they're done. Don't let them burn. Matzah isn't particularly pleasant on its own, but it definitely is not going to be nice if you, it's definitely not going to be nice if you let it burn. So, again, just kind of waiting for that timer to go. You can use this time to clean up a little bit, get a drink of water, put some stuff away if you want. We are now done with the main process. So the next part is going to be letting them cool. And that's what your baking racks are for. If you have the time and you haven't taken out your cooling racks yet, take them out now. Prepare, you're just going to quickly take the matzah and put them on. And we're going to check ours in about 45 seconds. Hopefully they will be ready. If they're not ready and you still have time, just flip them over, put them back in. This is, it's not an exact science because, we're doing them in different shapes, we're doing them in different sizes. So it's never going to be exactly the same every time. So a lot of this is by ear. We're cooking at very high temperature, so you really need to keep an eye on it. So as soon as it says it's ready, we got about 10 seconds. We're just going to check them. And if they're not ready, we're going to put them back in. And if I have to, I will run this timer to 0. Well, not to 0, so like 1 or 2 seconds, because we definitely need them out by 18 minutes exactly. All right, let's check. these are almost done. Almost done. They probably need another minute, and luckily we have another minute to give them. So that is what we're going to do. They are starting to brown a little bit. All right. Turn off our timer. We have 1 minute and 5 seconds. We are going to let it run as close as possible, and then we're going to take it out. I'm going to check it I'm going to check it when it says 20 seconds on our timer here. I keep looking at the side of my laptops here, helping me keep time today. All right. So when this says 20 seconds, we're going to run over and we're going to take a look at them. If they need any more than that, I'll give them what I can give them, but we're running on close time. This is much better time than I did yesterday, so definitely getting better at this. And hopefully, if you were to do this a second time, you'll do it too. So, all right, 3 seconds, 2, 1, let's check them. All right, 10. All right, I gotta take them out, guys. How they look? Oh, look at that timing, out of the oven with exactly, all right, exactly the right amount of time to spare. All right, so let's take a look at our work here. Let's take one. You can see that it has some browning on it. It's nice and firm. It's still a little wobbly because it's cooling, so we're gonna put them right on our racks. Turn off your oven. Unless for some reason you decide that you need to make more than one batch of this. Let's turn that off. All right. So those are going to cool a little bit. Here, I'll bring them over so you can see. We have 6 pieces of matzah, 3 on this board. And 3 on this one. You can really see some of the brown came through on these, which is good. And actually, they don't have, if you pick one up, they don't have a ton of that extra flour on them, so they're not going to be kind of powdery to eat. They are a little thicker than I wanted them to be, so I think next time the plan would be to flour the board more and roll them out a little thinner. These are thicker than the ones I made last night. And they have more, they feel a little more like pita than matzah does. But that's all right. So we're going to let them cool for a second. And then as soon as we do, we're going to take some of our olive oil. We're going to put it into a little container. If you have a paintbrush, use that. If you have a fork, use that. If you have a spoon, use that. Knife, use that. Hands, use that. Or you can just dip your fingers in it. It's the least hygienic way to do it. But if you don't have any tools, that's how you do it. God gave us tools, right? That's the thought anyway. You were given tools from our birth. All right. So let's paint these guys a little bit. We're going to have to hold them because they're going to want to run away from us. You just want a little bit of olive oil in each one. So careful with how much you put on. And then that can sit for a second. We're going to olive oil all of them, and then we'll sprinkle our salt and garlic on. If you have other tasty additions to your matzah, you have another herb or spice or seasoning you want to put on your matzah, then don't use salt and don't use garlic. Use whatever you want. This is the fun part. Now that we've done all the hard work, we're going to take some time to try and make these little pieces of flatbread, little pieces of matzah, a little bit more enjoyable. They should be kosher Passover. Obviously, like I mentioned earlier in the video, I wasn't using special Passover flour, but if that is not a bother for you, like it isn't for me particularly, then they're kosher. They'll do the job. Now these are little baby ones, right? It'd be difficult to do much with them. The ratio for flour to water is about 3 to 1. So 3 parts flour, 1 part water, plus a little bit more. So if you want to play with those ratios, you want to make a lot more matzah, you find that this is actually enjoyable, and you want to continue to do it this way, then absolutely do it. Sprinkle a little bit of salt on here. I'm using kosher salt, but table salt will be good as well. And it'll be a little harder for you to put too much salt on, which I am probably doing. That's all right. All right. If you want, you're a little nervous about the amount of salt I just put on, that's okay. Just shake off the excess salt. It's still warm, it'll hold some of that salt, but some of that salt will come right off. So if you put too much on, like I did, just tap it, it'll come right off. Now we're gonna add our garlic powder. I believe that there is never too much garlic, but of course be as judicious with your garlic powder as you want, or your spice or whatever you're putting on here. All right, so these are finished. So we're gonna let them cool all the way, and we'll try them. We'll see. Well, I'm gonna try them. I'm not gonna try mine now, but you should try yours. See how you like them. And meanwhile, while we're doing that, let's see if we can pull up the whiteboard and have a little bit of a conversation about politics today. All right. So there are a couple topics I'm going to touch on today. Let's take a look at what we've got on the old whiteboard. So we've got a lot of topics on the whiteboard this week. We're not going to get to all of them. I'm just going to touch on one or two things, just kind of what I think are the most pressing things right now. And then I will let you get back to your Saturday. And for all those who are watching who are preparing for Passover, Chag Pesach Sameach, and hopefully you can get back to preparing whatever it is that you're having for Passover Seder tonight. So, gun access and violence in America. So this is a topic I want to cover. Obviously, the last 2 weeks, we've had these horrendous mass shootings that have rattled the nation, much like they do every single time. Living in America, it's a weird place where there are mass shootings all the time. There are school shootings fairly regularly. Thank goodness we haven't had them in a while because school has been virtual. But there's just so much gun violence in America. And so I wanted to address a little bit kind of like how the right to bear arms came about, how the NRA has changed over the years, and kind of the understanding of guns from a judicial perspective and from kind of an American culture perspective have kind of changed throughout our history. So when the United States was founded, one of the reasons that we were so gung-ho about everyone having a right to guns was because when we were fighting the British, one of the things that the British did was to destroy storehouses full of guns that militias would use, right? So British troops so in the colonial days, British troops were not in British regulars were not in the colonies all the time. A lot of the time, if there was an attack or a raid or something like that, militias would come up. People who owned weapons would defend their town from whatever it was, whether it was conflict with the natives or animal attacks or, thieves and bandits and stuff like that. That's what would happen, right? So in order to stop the colonists from rebelling against the British regulars, when they actually arrived to put down the rebellion after we declared our independence, they would go to destroy storehouses. The battles of Lincoln and Concord were specifically about either destroying British weapons depots or protecting colonist weapons depots before the British could destroy them. So it was actually a really critical part of how we became independent. Obviously, once we had allies in the French who were providing weapons and things to things to that effect to the British colonists who were revolting, in the U.S. Continental Army. Right, the scale of weapons changed a little bit. But the truth is, before then, guns were a fairly common thing. Most households had them. And the reason was very simple. You were defending your home from attack. And in fairness to them, at the time, attacks were prevalent, right? You never knew. Oftentimes, you didn't know much outside of your town. And there were roving bandits, there were conflicts with the natives, there were animal attacks. These things were not unusual. And especially if you were traveling on the road, an animal attack was perfectly common. So having a weapon made tons of sense. So when after we win the war, or the British surrender, however you perceive of it, we send them packing. And essentially, when the states are set up in the Articles of Confederation, part of your responsibilities as a citizen, as a property holding citizen, other than to vote, and to kind of manage your household, and to, express yourself in the public forum, was to simply say, was to lend your service to the militia, if the militia was called up to defend the state for whatever reason, either from, whatever conflicts or what have you. So guns, then, again, there was this defensive thing. You had one because the purpose of it was to give your service to the state if it was ever needed. After the Continental Congress and the Articles of Confederation are dissolved, we decided Constitution makes more sense. We start to draw up an army, a real regular standing army that, is paid by the federal government and things of that nature. At that point, once we've done that, once we've created an army and the militias are no longer needed, and actually what we knew as the militias then are kind of closer to what the National Guard are now, the state would provide weapons. So no one needed a weapon, and your right to bear arms, even though it was in the Constitution, the practical purpose for which it had been designed, brought into the Bill of Rights, was, the Bill of Rights was essentially a reaction to things that the British did to the colonists that they didn't like, right? So why, for example, are we protected from quartering troops in our home? Well, because during the Revolution, British troops would commandeer large homes and would stay in people's upstairs and attics and would require them to house them, more or less at gunpoint, in order to reduce the costs of the British having their troops over here, right? Not having to build big fortresses and things to house their troops. So if you look at the Bill of Rights, a lot of it is just a reaction to things that we didn't like the British were doing. But once we had a standing army that protected the entirety of what was now the United States of America, all 13 states, the point of having an individual gun that you would then loan service to the state government as needed, it no longer made sense. It wasn't part of the paradigm any longer. And although people still had guns for kind of the other, particular things, the having of weapons in kind of a mass store for the purpose of militarization was entirely within the realms of the federal government, and then later onto the state governments with the National Guard units. And this kind of, you don't need a gun. Having a gun is kind of like, not a cultural thing or whatever. It extended for a very long period of time. And then in the, I believe it's the 1970s, it might be the 1960s, the National Rifle Association, which, by the way, has existed for a very long time, and whose policy before this portion I'm about to talk about was primarily a licensing, training, and safety protection organization, right? If you got a gun, the expectation was you join the NRA, and you did it because they would teach you how to properly store your gun, how to properly clean your gun, all these types of things, essentially keeping you, the gun, and anyone around you safe. It was a safety organization, and occasionally a hunting organization too, right? So in the 1960s, I believe it was, the NRA starts accepting money from weapons manufacturers. And in order for weapons manufacturers to make more money, they have to make more weapons. So this, what happens is, like I've talked about in past episodes with money and politics, this is essentially money and organizations. The mission of the NRA starts to change from going to be like a gun safety organization to a gun culture organization, if that makes sense. Essentially, we should make sure that as many people as possible have guns. Now, of course, this was not a universal understanding. When the Black Panthers had guns, when other minority groups had guns, the NRA has been very silent about their gun rights, but that's not really the portion I want to talk about. Then we get to the Heller decision. So Heller versus DC, very famous Supreme Court case. Essentially, Antonin Scalia writes that essentially states don't have the right to stop you from having a gun because of the Second Amendment, which, by the way, is an ahistorical interpretation, as hopefully I've demonstrated, of what the Second Amendment means. So essentially the facts of that case are Heller is trying to, I believe the facts of the case, my memory serves me, are Heller is in D.C., he's carrying a gun openly, the police arrest him and say, hey, you're not allowed to have a gun here, and he challenges that on constitutional grounds. It finds its way up to the Supreme Court, as these issues tend to do, and then of course we have the famous Antonin Scalia opinion, where he says that essentially guns for all, right? Anyone can have a gun, the states can't stop you. So, and by the way, on Heller's side were the NRA with the money that they now had from the weapons manufacturers. So this kind of gun culture in America is actually fairly new. And before our parents' generation, it really didn't exist. I say all this to kind of nail home the point that this is not a permanent fixture of American life. And just as easily as we were kind of brought into it, we might be able to bring ourselves out of it. And the reason I sound a little bit optimistic is because the NRA has recently filed for bankruptcy. And although there seems to be this fervor on the right to protect the Second Amendment and to shoot at things in campaign commercials, thank you, Joe Manchin and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, it doesn't have to be this way, right? We can use the NRA's breaking up and bankruptcy as a cultural shifting moment to either re-implement gun control or to just simply start a culture like we had before the 60s of, you know, a gun is a thing that you have if you want it. It's not a cultural thing. There's no cultural piece of it. You just have it because either you like hunting, you like trap shooting or whatever, but it's not a personal thing. You're not screaming at the top of your lungs that you're going to kill a cop if he comes to take it from you, right? Because, hey, look, people on the right, the truth is, if you say you're going to rebel, you know, you put down tyranny, or you're gonna kill someone who tries to take your guns, who's going to come take your gun? It's going to be the police, who you claim you respect. The military, who you claim you respect, right? So, a little bit of hypocrisy there, just pointing that out, you know, casually. But yeah, so we can use this moment in time to move the conversation away from gun culture as it is now and bring back kind of the pre-60s American culture, which was having a gun was not either a cultural or political incident. You had a gun because you wanted a gun, and although you had rights with that gun, there were expectations that, you know, that you would be careful with the gun, you would train with the gun, that you weren't, you know, there wasn't people walking around strapped with gazillions of rounds of ammunition. So I'm hopeful. I think, you know, we can use this on the left as a time to push back against gun culture. Personally, if you want to have a gun, go get a gun, you know, practice safe, you know, gun safety with it and stuff. Obviously keep it in lockers. But also, lots of people who have guns want some common sense gun reform. And I think the reason they want that, and of course, if you are a person who has a gun and you disagree with me, please leave it in the comments below and I'll respond next week, is because the people who are responsible want to make sure that they are not punished, right? They want to make sure that there's no issue that, you know, they've done the right thing. That other people should be encouraged to do the right thing as well. So, but overwhelming majorities of both political parties of Americans want some kind of common sense gun reform, and this includes kind of the very basics like criminal background checks for all sales, not just, you know, particular sales, so private sales and gun shows would be included. Requirements to keep your gun in a locked case at home, requirements to keep ammunition separate from the weapons themselves or keep ammunition locked up. There's, you know, again, magazine sizes and things like that. So there really is a culture there, and I think without all the money and all the propaganda being put out there from the NRA, we may have a chance to change the culture. So I'm optimistic about that. The next thing I want to talk about, which is to say the last thing I want to talk about this week, and again, we'll have a mega episode next week. We will talk about all of the things. There'll be 2 hours of politics. You will learn to hate me by the end of it. But if you're not watching live, you want to skip around the topics you want to hear about. So, the second thing I want to talk about is the left cannot get complacent. What does that mean? So, recently, President Biden canceled $1 billion of student loan debt, which is great. It's really wonderful. The $1 billion that was canceled was specifically for for-profit colleges. As you may remember, Betsy DeVos was not willing to cancel that debt, even though lawsuits had come forward And legislation, I believe, had been signed that said, hey, these people got screwed. The degrees didn't mean anything. They were charged all this money. It ought to be canceled. And so there was a lot of fighting back from Betsy DeVos and her education department on that issue. And she refused to do it, but now it's been done. Great news. And obviously for the people who were the borrowers who got shafted, it's a godsend, right? I mean, I can't even imagine what my life would look like if my student debt was suddenly canceled. So for those people, it's great news and they should be very happy. The second thing, and I'll get to why that's complacency in a second. Well, why it could be complacency in a second. Let me just, this other thing. And then of course, Biden's Build Back Better plan is on its way through Congress. Biden is looking to spend a huge amount of money on infrastructure and things like that. Some of that infrastructure is even green infrastructure. And so all of this sounds very good. The point of this segment is to say that those two things sound very good. So what's the problem? The problem is it's not nearly enough. And that shouldn't really be surprising. Joe Biden is kind of a middle-of-the-road centrist type. He is trying to be bold on some things. Recent reports have said he's enjoying the idea that he's considered more bold than Barack Obama. He's talking to historians about, the boldness of FDR. Again, all positive things, but proof's in the pudding, Joe. If you really want lefties to fawn over you and to love you, you gotta do the stuff. And you ain't doing it just yet. So $1 billion of student debt cancellation is great. However, student loan debt at this moment stands at around $1.7 trillion. So $1 billion is less than 1%. Is less than 10% of 1%, is like 1/1000th, not even, of this total student debt that is out there right now. So while it sounds like a great accomplishment, Biden, you have to do more. You have the authority under the under the act that gives the education department the right to give loans, is also the right to end loans. And that can come straight from the President Biden. You can do this by executive order. Cancel all student debt. It will change the economy fundamentally for millions and millions of people. I think the number is 47 million people still have student loans. You can fundamentally change the economy and create a real boom from the bottom up that will really get this economy rolling. Not since World War II. And the second thing is, speaking of huge expansions of things that can be done to get the economy growing, the Build Back Better plan is great. It really is. There are a lot of good things with it. There are a lot of things that it's missing. It'd be nice if it had a fracking ban and more green infrastructure. But the truth is, it's not the Green New Deal, right? So we on the left cannot be satisfied with what is effectively a half measure from Joe Biden saying, hey, this is my big infrastructure deal. You can go bigger, Joe. You have to go bigger. This country's roads and bridges, Kyle Kulinski cites this all the time. The Society of Civil Engineers gives infrastructure in the United States like a D. I think he says a D+. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's pretty low. We can have fundamentally an infrastructure that is best in the world. And the way that we do that is we take bold action. We spend huge amounts of money. We put this country to work. We create federal jobs programs. We create private corporations like the Tennessee Valley Association, who manages huge sectors of electricity in parts of the country. We allow the American people to fund and then reap the rewards of these giant infrastructure deals, which will improve our quality of life, give people good paying union jobs, and will create a country that honestly is, I hate to use the phrase, but great again, right? As far as infrastructure goes, right? Obviously we have a long way to go on other issues, but as far as our infrastructure is concerned, we can have the best in the world. We deserve the best in the world. We have the ability to do it. And the only thing stopping you, Joe Biden, is your ability to bully some senators, Democratic senators, and your ability to think bigger and broader. All right, everyone, that is going to be this week's show. I hope you enjoyed the shorter version of the show. It will be live, cut up very soon afterwards. For those celebrating Passover, Chag Pesach Sameach, enjoy your Passover. May your feast of unleavened bread be wonderful as it can be. I hope you enjoyed making matzah. If you do enjoy making matzah, make it again. The recipe is very simple. I'll put it up underneath the video description so that you have a copy of it to refer to at any time and you want to bake it with me again. Obviously, it takes a very short amount of time. We will be back next week with our super mega brioche bread episode. Maybe I'll think of something fun to call it, and we'll go from there. All right, everybody, take care and happy Passover.